What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, Under Center with Abelson, presented by Real Spiel Podcast. We are back. We finally have a previews episode. Oh, it's been a long wait. I know week zero was last week, but week zero just doesn't have the appeal, the aura that week one has. We had a ranked matchup last week, and it was a good game. Iowa State versus Kansas State. Both teams came out sloppy. Conditions weren't that great, so you could expect, a few turnovers. But Iowa State ended up prevailing and taking the win. But we're here, man. We have almost every single team in the country. I think every single team in the country playing this week. 3 days, Labor Day weekend. Actually, more than 3 days. We got Thursday games, we got Friday games, Saturday games, Sunday games, Monday games. It's a good time. It's a good time right now. But like I said, this is going to be a previews episode. We're going to touch on a bunch of games. Going to tell you some of the matchups that I like. Give you just a little breakdown of things I like, who I think is going to win. Something we're going to also do is we're gonna keep our track of our record against the spread. Um, every week I'm gonna have a previews episode where I'm just again gonna touch on some of the big games of the week, and I'll give you my picks, obviously against the spread, and we'll just keep track of those throughout the year to see how we do on these. Um, anything I'd like to shoot for 60+%. Anything above 50 means you're making money and you're profiting. Like I said, this is the only time that I do bet on stuff, so but yeah, like I said, let's get into some of these games. Obviously, the biggest game of the week, we got Texas traveling up to Ohio State to play in Ohio Stadium. Some people are calling this the best game ever. Possibly the best regular season, the best opening game ever. I mean, I can't really think of a bigger opening game. Um, I wouldn't go as far as saying this is the best regular season game ever. I still think that's probably LSU versus Alabama back when Joe Burrow played. But yeah, this has the making to potentially be one of the best regular season games we've seen. Um, Archmania, Arch Manning coming in with Texas, Julian saying. I think some of the obvious keys to this game is um, Ohio. We'll start with Ohio State. Ohio State is a team that lost a bunch of talent. I think they had 15 plus guys drafted last year. A lot of those guys were high level, high character experience guys. So they were having to replace a lot of talent and a lot of experience. So especially on the defensive end, they're going to be starting a lot of young guys. I think Sonny Styles and maybe one other player is a returning starter on there. So they're gonna have Caleb Downs. Yeah, Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles are really their only top returning starters. So like I said, they're gonna have a lot to replace on that end. And even on the offensive end, they're starting obviously a new quarterback with Julian saying that offensive line. They're going to be starting a couple new guys. They had a couple guys go out in the draft. So I don't think that's a great position to be in against Texas. Texas did have to replace some key pieces as well, but they did bring back a lot of talent. Colin Simmons on that defensive line. They brought back the core group of their offensive line. I think the biggest factor of this game is going to be that defensive line of Texas versus the offensive line of Ohio State. And early on, I am leaning towards the defensive line of Texas to have an advantage. I think Texas has one of the best defensive lines in the country, anchored by Colin Simmons. Um, I do think it helps that Ohio State is at home, so they don't have to deal with the noise factor or anything like that. But I think that is going to be a big thing to watch to see which unit can establish dominance and get the edge. Like I said, I think it's going to be Texas. Another thing we're going to have to look at, obviously, is the quarterback match. We got two kind of official first-time starters. I know Arch Manning started a couple games last year. Julian Sandings might have came in some crunch time when the game was over a few times as well. But both of these guys officially making their first starts. I like Texas slightly. Not even. I like Texas slightly when it comes to the advantage of the quarterback. Arch Manning, I think he has. People like to forget he played two full games as a full-time starter last year when Quinn Ewers was out. I think that has a lot. I think that's a big advantage, man. I mean, one of them was against UTSA. You know, you had a group of five team, but one of them was against Mississippi State. I know they're at the bottom of the SEC, but they're still an SEC team. They still have guys on their roster. And he played extremely well in those two games, well enough for people to want him to continue to be the starter last year. And I think those two games go a long way with establishing his confidence. I think he's been out there, he's ran out of the tunnel as the starter. And like I said, I think that holds a lot of weight. Um, Julian Saying, on the other hand, like I said, he's came in a couple times during crunch time and mop up duty. But he has absolute weapons. Jeremiah Smith, he has Carnell Tate, he has Ennis out there. So he has a group of receivers that will help a first time starting quarterback. And he has obviously Ryan Day. I think he's going to be back at the play calling position with Hartline going to the offensive coordinator. So I think Ryan Day is going to put Julian Saying in positions to succeed. But I think I'm just slightly leaning towards Texas. I think they have the more talented roster. Like I said, I think the defense is. I think their defense is going to be an incredible unit. They got Ant Hill back there. Like I said, they have Colin Simmons, so they have absolute studs back there. Um, and you're giving me 2.5 points. I'm going to take Texas money line because if it's anything under like 2.5 points, 2 to 3 points, I just take the money line. So I'm going to take Texas money line, and you're going to give me the points. I'll take them plus 2.5. I think Texas is just going to be able to put together a more complete game. I think Sark's going to put Arch Manning in positions early to succeed. A lot of stuff around the line of scrimmage. A lot of misdirection, eye candy stuff just to get his confidence going. And then I think once his confidence is going, I think he'll be unleashed. And I just think, they have two elite backs that will help him a lot. CJ Baxter's coming back. Wisner's back. The run game's going to be good. So I think that's going to help take some pressure off of Arch Manning. So I like Texas money line. I like them if you're going to give me the points at 2.5. So next up, we got Clemson versus LSU, the game of the real Death Valley. Winner gets to take the bragging rights. LSU traveling up to Death Valley to play Clemson. This is another huge, huge game that's going to have, a bunch of implications going down to the season. Um, Man, I'm excited for this one. I think this is 4 versus 9 matchup, if I'm not wrong. A couple takeaways and keys to this game. Obviously, you have the defensive line of Clemson. You got Woods and Parker anchoring the defensive line. That's probably the most talented group. Both of those guys, should be first round picks next year. Um, that I think is going to be the biggest key for Clemson compared to. I know I talked about it in the last game versus Texas and Ohio State, but a lot of these games were won and lost in the trenches. And LSU, they lost. They're starting 4 new guys on their offensive line, going up against that defense line in your first game on the road. Man, that is going to be a tough, tough ask. Um, that right there, I think, is going to make or break the game for either team. And I do think Clemson's defensive line is going to have more success. Garrett Nussmeier, he's going to have to, play extremely well. I feel like he's going to be under pressure a lot during the game. I feel like he's going to be having to break the pocket a lot. So he does have a group of wide receivers. I think LSU has a top, 5 receiving core in the country. They got a couple transfers through the transfer portal, so they have the talent to do it. They really have the talent to do it. But I think that is the biggest factor. Cade Klubnik, did he take that next step? We saw the way he played against Texas last year in the playoff game. Did he take that next step? Because people are talking about him highly this year. I think he's second in odds for the Heisman. So he has a lot. He doesn't have a lot to prove, but if Clemson is going to get where they want to get this year, he's going to have to play extremely well throughout the year, and I think he will. Like I've said, I think this is LSU's best, or not LSU, but Clemson's best team since those Trevor Lawrence days. Harold Perkins Jr., he's back on the defensive line for LSU. He's a guy who was supposed to be one of their best players last year, but tore his ACL before even the beginning of the year. So he's back, anchoring that defensive line. This is, I think, there's a lot of pressure on Brian Kelly, um, not just for this game, but for this year. Brian Kelly, he's been doing well at LSU. He won 10 games twice, 9 games the other year, but they haven't made the playoffs. They've only been to the SEC or really competed for the SEC championship once. This is going to be a game where LSU fans feel they should go out and win. And I think he has a lot of pressure on him to win. Um, I'm leaning Clemson on this one. I think they're 3.5 point favorites. That does seem about right. They're the home team, and these teams are. I think the rosters are fairly even, so I think that 3.5 kind of gives the edge to Clemson being at home. And I like it. I do think Clemson wins. I do think Clemson even covers the spread. I could see them winning by a touchdown. I think them being at home has a real impact. If this was on the road, if this was at LSU, I would be favoring LSU. But because this is at Clemson, I do think that gives them an edge. And like I said, I do think they have the edge on the defensive line. The offensive line at LSU is pretty shaky, and the receiving core. They got guys like Brian Wesco coming back. Uh, they had a couple true freshmen last year on an already talented receiving core coming back. So I think those guys are going to take a big jump in the second year. And I like Clemson on this one. Another huge game we have is Notre Dame and Miami. Notre Dame going on the road to play Miami, the new look Canes with Carson Beck, CJ Carr manning the field for Notre Dame. This game is very interesting to me. I've been going back and forth on what I like. This has probably been the hardest game for me to pick, honestly. I think some of the initial keys, uh, Notre Dame's elite run game. They're bringing back Jeremiah Love. They're bringing back Price. They're bringing back that talented offensive line, going up against Miami's defensive line. Ruben Bain anchoring the defensive front for Miami. Miami's bringing back a defensive line who was top 20 in sacks last year. I think that's going to be very pivotal. Seeing that, I think Notre Dame is going to come out and try and establish the run. Marcus Freeman, his team's last couple of years have been tough and physical. Last year, especially, they really tried to establish the run, whether it was through Riley Leonard with the quarterback or again Jeremiah Price through the running back. I think for them to get to that next level this year, it took them a while to get to that level last year. I think for them to get to that level this year, they're going to have to be able to air it out. CJ Carr making his first start, going up against that talented defensive line. I think he's going to have to lean on the running backs this game. Jeremiah Love, Price. I think they're going to have to establish the run early. That way, CJ Carr can get things going because Miami could. I think the game plan they're going to have is to just kind of stack the box, to stop and sell out against the run, forcing CJ Carr to beat them. And I think it's going to be one of those situations where it's like, hey, you're going to have to prove that you can beat us. This is your first time starting. You're going to have the nerves. Prove to us that you can come on the road and throw the ball all over the field and beat us. Because I don't think if you're Miami, you can let the running backs get things going. Because if Jeremiah Love is running all over the field, going for 100, 150 yards, a couple touchdowns, I think it's a recipe for disaster for them. Carson Beck, what kind of Carson Beck are we going to see? He didn't have the best of seasons last year. He was still pretty solid. Are we going to see the Carson Beck we saw 2 years back when Georgia made the SEC championship game? I'm still super high on Carson Beck. I think he's a talented guy. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. Um, he does have some questions with the receiving core. Miami lost a lot of receivers last year, and they're bringing in a lot of new receivers this year. And I know Carson Beck, he didn't spend a lot of training camp and a lot of summer throwing the ball because he was still rehabbing that arm. From what I hear, that arm is fully healthy and he's good to go. Um, I think he's going to play well. Carson Beck is a guy with a lot of experience. He's played a lot of big games. Like I said, 2 years ago, he had a lot of big games. Georgia lost to the SEC champs Alabama that year, but he played in a bunch of big games. So I really don't have any concerns for Carson Beck. I just think if is he going to be able to find some weapons? Is he going to be able to find a wide receiver one this year? And if he does, I think they're going to be in good shape. You know, Miami is a Mario Cristobal led team. They're going to have an elite offensive line. That is his bread and butter. So I'm excited to see what that offense does this year. Um, I'm leaning towards Miami. I think them being on the road is a little bit of an advantage. I think the fact that they have the more experienced quarterback is going to play extremely well. I think the defensive line of Miami is going to be able to shut or not shut down the run. I think they're going to be able to get to CJ Carr, and I think they're going to throw him off and disrupt him. Plus, they're the underdogs. I guess I'm going with mostly underdog. Oh, no, not really. But and you're giving me the points. I think Notre Dame is a 2.5 point favorite. So you're going to give me the 2.5 with Miami. I'm taking the money line, but I'm going to take the points as well. I do like Miami to win this one. Let's talk about Bama and FSU. Alabama is going on the road to Florida State to play what we hope is a new look Florida State coming off a very disappointing season last year, finishing 2-10. Alabama, they're bringing in Ty Simpson as a starter, replacing Milrow. They're trying to get back on track after what some people would call a subpar year in Alabama standards, finishing 9-3, missing the playoffs. Uh, Ryan Grubb is back with Kalen DeBoer. That's his right hand man. Last time they were together, they were in the national championship game with Washington. Um, I think the line on this one is Alabama 13.5. I honestly like that, and I kind of like it a lot. I am in no, I have absolutely no reason to have faith in FSU being able to beat Bama in this game. I am in full blown, I have to see it to believe it mode with FSU. Um, they didn't really get a lot of big. I know they got Deuce Knight from USC, the receiver, but there wasn't really, and they got Thomas Castellano as well. But I think they had such a just terrible roster last year. I think they need more than that to really flip things around. I do think they're going to be better this year. I think Florida State's going to be much better. They got Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator. He obviously has great philosophies, and he's always done extremely well with mobile quarterbacks. And he has one like Castellanos. So I do think Florida State's going to be much better this year, but I just do not see them going and giving Alabama. I think they can give Alabama an early fight, but I think the talent of Alabama is just going to eventually pull away. Alabama is just, they probably have the best defensive back group in the country. They probably have one of the best defensive lines in the country. They're solid at receiver with Ryan Williams. So as long as Ty Simpsons can go out there and honestly, even if he can just go out there and be a game manager until he kind of gets his feet wet, I think Alabama will be in good shape. Like I said, they are 13.5 point favorites. I honestly love Alabama to cover this. I could think it could be a little tight early, but I think the longer the game goes on, the more Alabama's talent will just separate, and we're taking Alabama to cover. Next up, I want to talk about Baylor and Auburn. I'm excited to watch this game. I know this game is definitely getting some buzz, but it's kind of getting overshadowed by some of the other games. This is on Friday night. You got Auburn traveling up to Waco or down to Waco or sideways to Waco, whichever direction it's in. This is a sneaky good game, man. I love Baylor. They finished last year winning 6 or 7 straight games. They're bringing back their quarterback Robert Sawyer. Dave Aranda, he's a great coach, and I think things are starting to finally click. And you get this game at home. Auburn, a lot of people are extremely high on Auburn this year. I just can't fully get into it yet. I can't buy my stock into Auburn yet. Jackson Arnold, the transfer from Oklahoma, is making his start. Things were kind of looking a little questionable during training camp. You heard a lot of things about, is Jackson Arnold the right guy? Is he having confidence problems? There was that video that came out where Hugh Freeze was throwing his visor down and screaming at him. I'm not buying too much into that. It's practice, coaches are going to yell. But there was some questions with his confidence level, and I don't think that's where you want to be right now. I don't think that's where you want to be. But I do think Jackson Arnold he's a good quarterback. I think not a great quarterback. He's a good quarterback. A lot of his struggle last year was not his fault. His top five receivers got hurt. The offensive line couldn't block to save their lives. Um, I do think he's going to be in a better position, but I'm just not seeing him as a quarterback who's going to turn Auburn around and turn them into a 9-win team. They do have a lot of talent this year, though. They got Singleton, one of the transfers from Georgia Tech, at the receiver position. I think they're bringing back the running back as well. But I'm leaning towards Baylor on this one. I think Auburn is favored. Yeah, Auburn is minus 2.5. I honestly like Baylor a lot on this one. I think Auburn just has too many questions. What type of Jackson Arnold are we going to get? And I do just like Baylor's quarterback a lot more. And I think Dave Aranda is going to dial up a defensive play. He is a defensive minded coach. I think he's going to dial up a defensive scheme that's going to give Jackson Arnold some trouble. I do think this one's going to be close. I think it's going to be a tough physical game. I honestly like the under on this one too. I think the over and under was at 57.5. I like the under on this one. And I like Baylor to win. I'll take them plus 2.5 if you're going to give it to me. Another sneaky good game that we're going to have is Georgia Tech versus Colorado. Um, these are, I think, teams that are kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Colorado is a team that lost a lot of talent. Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn Jr. And Georgia Tech is a team that's bringing back a lot of their top talent. Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, a talented defensive group. And I think that's the biggest key up to this game. Colorado, they brought in Caden Salters from Liberty. This was a guy who played at the Conference USA level. A good quarterback by all means, but I think it's going to be a big factor. Him coming into Big 12 Power 4 football. Um, Liberty is a team that literally lost to, I think, Kennesaw State last year, and then the year before, yeah, they went 13-0, but I don't think they played any Power 4 or 5 teams that year. So he doesn't really have a lot of. And then when they did, they played Oregon. They got absolutely blasted. He's a good quarterback. I like him, but I think that's just a tough situation to be. Georgia Tech is a team that people are talking highly of this year. They're talking about Georgia Tech like, they're going to make a run for the ACC championship game. They could be a playoff team. And I do think that they have a fairly favorable schedule that can line up to do that. But I just have Georgia Tech on this one. I think they just have too much production they're bringing back. Again, Jamal Haynes King. They're bringing back a talented defensive group, a good offensive line, and they just have a coach who gets that team ready to play. They play a tough physical brand, and I do think they do beat Colorado relatively easily. I think they're going to win by over a touchdown. I wouldn't go as far as saying that they're going to win by 2 touchdowns, but I can see Georgia Tech winning anywhere between by 7 to 10, 11 points. So we're taking Georgia Tech money line. They are 4.5-point favorites. We're taking Georgia Tech spread. I also do like Jamal Haynes to anytime touchdown, and I also do like Haynes King anytime touchdown as well. He's an extremely talented running quarterback, and I think he's going to find his way in the end zone at some point. Another game I wanted to touch on was Syracuse and Tennessee. A lot of people, I'm hearing a lot of people saying Tennessee is just going to absolutely blow Syracuse out. They're going to win by 3 touchdowns, and I am just not seeing that. Tennessee, this is a team who lost their quarterback at the spring transfer portal window. They had to bring in Joey Aguilar, who was at UCLA, but he played for App State last year. And this is a guy who led the country in turnovers last year. He threw the most picks in the country last year. So I'm just not seeing a Tennessee blowout. That's a tough quarterback system to learn. I think the offense is going to come out not firing all on cylinders. I think it's going to take them a couple games to get their thing going. Because even last year with Nico, we saw he struggled towards the beginning of the year, and it kind of took him a while to get things going. I know they blew out like Kent State, but Kent State's literally one of the worst teams in the country at any level. But yeah, I think it's going to take a while for Tennessee to get that offensive going. This was a guy who came in late in the transfer portal window in spring. He already wasn't an extremely talented guy, solid quarterback, but not extremely talented. So I do think Syracuse, they did lose a lot as well, but I think Fran Brown's going to put out a team that is going to be able to play tough. And I do like Syracuse to cover on this. I think it's somewhere around like 14, 15 and a half. So I'm taking Syracuse plus 14, plus 15 and a half, whatever it is around. I'm going to take that. We're going to touch on a couple notable games as well. Just real fire off real quickly a couple other games that I think could be intriguing. Um, Boise State and South Florida. South Florida is going to be an extremely good Group of Five team. I think they have a chance to win the American Conference this year. Boise State obviously having to replace Ashton Genty, but I think they're still going to be a team who they're my pick to win the Group of Five and to make the college football playoff. Max Maddock is back. They're just a consistent team. That line is sitting at 5.5. Um, I honestly, it's gone down a little bit. I think it was at like 7.5. I think South Florida has a chance to stick around and hang around in this game, especially with it being at home. Don't be surprised if they win. This is not like a pick. None of these other picks are going to really go against the spread for me, but I just, give me my take on these. I do think South Florida has a chance to cover that spread and hang around. We got a Thursday night game. We got Nebraska and Cincinnati. This is actually a very, very interesting game. Nebraska, they are year three with Coach Rule, Matt Rule. He's the coach known for year three at Temple, year three at Baylor. Now he's at year three at Nebraska, and a lot of people have Nebraska having a great year, making the playoffs. I do think Nebraska is going to be well. I think they picked up a couple key portal additions. I think that offense has a chance to kind of unleash this year. Year two with Dylan Raiola, I think he does take a step, but I think I'm not even a Satterfield guy. Me being a Louisville fan, he kind of sucked for us, to say the least. I do think Nebraska or Cincinnati does have a chance to stick around. I think they're going to make it competitive and they're going to make it a tough game for a few quarters. I still ultimately do like Nebraska winning, but I do think Cincinnati has a chance to make things interesting. Um, what else is there? What else? Uh, Toledo and Kentucky. This game has been going all over the place. I think Kentucky started out as like a minus 12 points. It got down to minus like 7, 6.5 at one point. Honestly, even though I'm a Louisville fan, I really wasn't buying into all that. Toledo is a solid MAC team, and I don't think Kentucky is going to be a very good team this year. And that's not me being a Louisville fan. That's me being just completely honest. Like don't think I don't think Mark Stoops has a lot of time left over there. I think if he has one bad year this year, I think if they have a really bad year, they might be looking elsewhere. But I don't think they're going to have much trouble with Toledo. I know a lot of people, were thinking this game was going to be, on upset alert, but I think Kentucky, I think they honestly cover the spread against Toledo. I think they'll win by a couple touchdowns. Um, yeah, so that's it for the week one previews. We touched on most of the big games. Those are my picks, some of my favorites. I'm gonna try and be out here, every week to give you guys my previews on the games for the week, my locks, my picks. Like I say, we're gonna keep track of the spreads throughout the year to see how I do. So as long I'm shooting for like 60%, actually, I would love 60%. I'm shooting for anything above 50%. College football is finally back. We have meaningful, real games. Week one is here. Enjoy the Labor Day weekend. Watch some football. Drink some beer if you're of age, and enjoy. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.